I want to talk about your writing practice. Well, mostly I'm going to talk about my writing practice, but you get the point. If you're new to this channel, I'm Greg. I write and self-publish fiction and nonfiction, and I use this space to share what has worked for me and what I've learned from what has not worked for me. I'm going to start this conversation about my writing practice with some bold statements. 1, I don't believe that writing is a gift that some people have and some people don't. Instead, I think that writing is something anyone can do if they want to and if they practice. You don't have to be good at spelling or at grammar or at any other structure. You just have to want to be a writer and then do some writing. Side note, your spelling and grammar and other parts of your writing craft will probably get better as you do it, but you don't need to start there. In a related note, there is sometimes a point of view that if you're not getting paid to be a writer, you're not actually a writer. That's crap. If you're writing, you're a writer. If you're painting, you're a painter. If you're running, you're a runner. Don't let some misplaced capitalist point of view about getting paid get in the way of naming how you spend your time and build your craft. 2, I don't believe in writer's block. I'm not saying it doesn't exist for other people. I'm not nearly that arrogant. I'm saying that it doesn't exist for me. I was in a writing class some years ago that referenced the book Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, which is currently selling its 30th anniversary edition. I recommend this book very highly, and I know that there are lots of books and lots of resources that will talk about writing as a practice that you can work on and build as you would build a muscle. I'm going to talk more about that in another minute or two, but for me, what I want to say is, when I want to write, I write. Again, more on that in a moment. 3, this one's maybe not so bold, but it's important, so I'm including it here. Storytelling is our oldest form of education. It is the core of both fiction and nonfiction writing. Story structure is heavily influenced by culture. In Western culture, we like characters who grow and learn something. But regardless of the cultural reference point, readers want to see themselves in writing, even, as I mentioned, in nonfiction. Now, maybe it's too late for this, but I don't want to be one of those videos that rambles on and on about why you should be interested in a topic without actually getting to the topic. So let's jump in. Here's how I approach my writing practice. First, just write some words, then write some more words. It's practice, which means it's an ongoing learning experience. Some writing sessions that I have aren't very productive. Some finish with a lot of words, but not much substance. And sometimes I hit gold. Gold in this case means that what I intend and what makes it to the page match pretty closely. If you're experiencing a block, write about writer's block. Write about what's bothering you. Write about why you're resisting your writing. Just write some words. This is the magic of Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones. She has a variety of really useful exercises designed to just get you writing. Next, commit the time. I block time to write and I protect that time. When I was working on a book a few years ago, my writing time was Thursdays after work and Saturday mornings. I had a lot going on, so that was what I felt I could carve out of my schedule. It took some practice to keep the priority on writing during those times, though. Friends would want to get dinner on a Thursday, or my partner at the time would want to have brunch or do something else on Saturday. And sure, sometimes I would schedule over my writing time, but I always found another time that week to reschedule it. I talked to lots of other writers who find that a million other things in their lives get prioritized ahead of their writing, and suddenly 6 months have passed and they haven't written anything at all. Next, set a timer for yourself actually writing words. This is one of the most useful techniques for me, especially if I'm feeling blocked at all. Set a 10, 15, or 20-minute timer. Commit to writing constantly during that time, no matter what you write about. Write your story, write about the weather, write about why you don't want to write. It's how I respond to any blockage I might be feeling. I sit down with a pen and pad or my laptop, whichever one I'm feeling in the moment. I set a timer for 10 minutes to start, and my first line might be, I don't want to write anything. Then if I stick with it and keep my pen on the paper or my fingers on the keyboard, I get to why I don't want to write and maybe even what I don't want to write. And once I name those blocks, they seem to dissolve. I may not always get a lot done on my actual project in these free write exercises, but it never fails to start my engine or restart my engine. All right, now for a word, several words actually, about editing. There are people who can successfully edit as they write, and those people are not me. I mean, more power to you if you can do that. But for me, The writing process and the editing process are completely separate. While I'm writing, there is room for everything. Unicorns working an assembly line, 3 suns in the sky, or characters that speak in tongues. And this is just the nonfiction I'm talking about. But when I start editing, I remember what I'm writing about. I remember who my target reader is. And I remember that sometimes I am super repetitive without good editing. And by the way, that's true. When you engage with editing like a necessary and separate step for improving your writing, you also get to know your own idiosyncrasies as a writer. And for the record, idiosyncrasies are not bad. They're part of your style. And your editing process will help those be stylistic choices that readers like rather than ones that distract. Okay, types of editing. Developmental editing. For me, there's a developmental edit that I do for myself early and throughout the process, and then there is developmental editing that I pay someone for if I'm headed for publication. But in essence, this editing work is about plot for fiction or through line for nonfiction. Did you start with a theme and stick to it, or are you wandering about? Speaking to myself right now. Do you need to go update the beginning because of where you went in the middle? Speaking again to myself right now. These are not bad things at all, but you don't want that inconsistency in the final product. So you got to make hard choices. Here's a point, by the way, about hard choices. This is sometimes referred to as killing your darlings, or as a dear poet friend once said, not all the turtles will live, which is dark and weird. And sometimes people say kittens instead of turtles, and you should think twice before spending an extended amount of time with those people. But the point is that you may write a beautiful chapter or an exciting character, or heck, maybe just a perfect line. And in the developmental edit, that line may not fit the overall structure, so it has to go. I keep a page on my laptop that I call the parking lot, and it's where great ideas are parked for when I need them again. Next is a copy edit, which makes adjustments for grammar and style and consistency. If a developmental edit is looking at the whole manuscript, a copy edit looks at individual chapters and at paragraphs, making sure everything works there. Next is line editing, which works at the sentence level. I once heard Barbara Kingsolver, who is my favorite novelist, say that she thought her primary job was at the sentence level. I've thought about that a lot and what it means about my own writing practice, especially when I'm working on editing my work. Finally, proofreading, which is a final check for errors and typos and such. Now, knowing the difference between all these editing types is mostly important if you're getting ready to publish something and need help from another person. Because in practice, as a writer, these kind of all moosh together, although it's definitely important because if your story isn't holding together, that typo on page 179 isn't your highest priority. So there's a range of things to do in editing. All of them are important. Next is reading. This is actually a pretty important part of my writing practice, and I got the clarification on this from reading Stephen King's book about writing called, handily enough, On Writing, a memoir of the craft. I read things all the time. I read things that I enjoy, things that are like what I'm writing. When I'm writing plays, I read more plays. I read things that are outside my normal realm. I try to read things that are by people I don't know. I pay attention to how sentences are built, how images are presented, what characters say, and what they don't say. So yeah, I mostly also read because I really like reading, but I pay a lot more attention since I started working on my own writing practice. All right. That's it. My writing practice in a nice little package. I do those things and then I rinse and repeat. And also, and this is important, I don't get down on myself if none of that is working. In the first few weeks of the pandemic, I thought I would get so much writing done. Then the lockdown drug on and I didn't write. For probably a year, I didn't write. And while it would have been super productive to beat myself up for that, instead, I waited until it rolled back around and there were some stories that I wanted to tell. I don't mean to confuse this with my earlier statement that I don't get writer's block. When there's a story I want to tell, I find a way to tell it. But sometimes, again, as in that first part of the pandemic, I don't feel like I have any stories to tell. Lately, thankfully, I have a lot of stories to tell, and I hope you do too. So go now out into the world, write your stories.